Back with you tonight on In Focus. The African Transformation Movement has written to the Home Affairs Minister requesting him to review and revoke entrepreneur Phil Craig's South African citizenship. Craig, who is the leader of the Referendum Party, has been advocating for the independence of the Western Cape from the Republic. ATM President Vuyo Zungula joins us now for that conversation. Thabo Zungula, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. In South Africa, constitutionally is a unitary amalgamation. So cessation does not even begin to form part of our constitution. So South Africa is one indivisible state. This is entrenched beyond any reasonable doubt. Why do you believe that a call, not only by the Cape referendum, but by 8 other parties, it would seem, would lead to any success of that idea?
Evening, Thabo. Look, let's start with this individual, Philip Craig. Firstly, he is a British national who came to South Africa 20 years ago and then subsequently got the citizenship of South Africa. Now, it needs to be emphasized that his citizenship, his South African citizenship, is a privilege. And because it is a privilege, he has to to submit himself towards the ideals of South Africa, the values of South Africa, and in fact, entrench himself in the values of South Africa, not divide South Africa or preach a message that is sowing divisions in our country. His utterances that, firstly, there needs to be a cessation of the Western Cape to create an independent country in the Western Cape, that on its own is sowing divisions in our country. And because of him being a foreigner, being someone who is privileged, who has privilege to get South African citizenship, it is not something that should be taken lightly, because we need to send a very strong message as a country that if you are ever given a privilege as a foreigner to have a South African citizenship, you need to abide by the values of South Africa. Never do something that is against the spirit of our constitution or the spirit of what we want to achieve in our country, as you rightfully say, that it is a unitary state, because we believe that there needs to be one South Africa, and we can't be having even apartheid towns such as your Kleinfontein or Orania. So this call that he's been making goes against the privilege that he received by giving South African citizenship. Yeah.
So are you saying the fact that he is a dual citizen is the only reason why you feel his citizenship should be revoked? Because what organized system do we have to evaluate the so-called spoilers of peace and stability or unity, if you like? If you've got the DA, you've got the Cape Coloured Congress, you've got the Freedom Front Plus, you've got the ACDP, you've got KOP, even ABC Party would have made similar calls for a Zulu independence. How do we evaluate how we deal with those spoilers of what you call peace and stability?
His first issue is the fact that, again, like I mentioned, is that he is a British foreigner who was privileged to receive South African citizenship. And therefore, his responsibility, therefore, is to abide by the values of the Constitution and never engage in any conduct that seeks to divide South Africa. The second issue here is that Citizenship Act 88 of 1995, Section 82B, designates the minister that if it is in the public interest, the minister can revoke or rescind the citizenship of any South African. Now, if you are going to be talking, for example, about someone who only has one citizenship, which is a South African citizenship, if his citizenship were to be revoked, he would become stateless, and that is not even allowed when it comes to international law. But when you talk about Philip Craig, you're talking about someone who's got citizenship in Britain. Therefore, when his citizenship is revoked, he still has a country that he can call home. In fact, he calls home, which is Britain. That is the second issue. The third issue, Thabo, it is that Philip Craig here is advocating for the creation of an Israel-like state. It is the very same Israel, South Africa, the South African government has taken to the ICJ because it is committing acts of genocide against Palestinians. Now, by him, saying he wants to create an Israeli state, he's effectively suggesting that he wants genocide in South Africa, because that is what is happening in Israel. There's genocide against Palestinians. Now, with our history as South Africans, and a history that is only 30 years ago, whereby there was apartheid in our country, where there was brutality against the African majority, we can never take such comments very lightly, because we know that only 30 years ago, the life of an African, the life of a black person in our country was cheap. The life of a black South African in our country was determined by the color of their skin because of the apartheid policies, which brutality was effected against black South Africans.
Yeah.
So it is on those reasons we as the ATM, we believe that it is in the interest of the public that his citizenship must be revoked. It is in the interest of uniting South Africa to make sure that anyone must understand that it will never tolerate it will never tolerate foreigners who are given the privilege of being South Africans to engage in a conduct that is divisive, that seeks to bring back apartheid through the back doors, that seek to bring about genocide, which we as a South Africa strongly oppose.
So the framework that you're calling for, the South African Citizenship Act, Section 8, subsection 2, says there's one condition that the minister can be able to do that, is that if that individual is sentenced in any country to a period of imprisonment of not less than 12 months for any offense, which if it was committed outside of the Republic would have also been constituted an offense in the Republic. So firstly, you would then need to have him charged with an offense and sentenced to a sentence that is over 12 months before he can even begin to revoke that.
If you read the entire Act, Section 8, 2B, 2B is the section that speaks specifically about it being in the interest of, it being in the public interest that a citizenship can be revoked. The other elements that you've correctly mentioned form part of the other broader pool of the reasons why a citizenship can be revoked. But what we are relying on, it is a Section 2B that is focusing only on the part that it is in the public interest. Therefore, anyone can agree, Thabo, it is in the public interest that we remove from our society, especially people who are coming from other parts of the world, who are welcomed in South Africa, given the status of being citizens of South Africa, but in turn want to divide South Africa, want to subjugate the African majority in particular. So it is on that reasons why we're saying, in the interest of uniting South Africa and sending a strong message that we cannot be a banana republic whereby each and every person who happens to have citizenship can come to South Africa and want to say, for example, if you listen to one of his utterances, he says he wants to create a state whereby people live in accordance to Western values. We are in Africa, we are South Africans. We need to be living in accordance to African values. Therefore, even himself, as being someone who says, he is now a South African citizen by the virtue of his citizenship, he needs to align himself to the values to the values of the African majority. We can't accept, Thabo, that in this day and age, South Africa is going to be a playground. People are going to come from far parts of the world, come to South Africa, and we are going to keep quiet as if nothing is happening. We want, as the ATM, that a strong message must be sent that if a person is given the privilege of being a South African citizenship, they must abide by our values as Africans. They must abide by what we want, which is a unified South Africa, not the message that we are currently pushing.
So clinging on to that last statement that you're making, so as the ATM, for example, you would support a call for cessation from the ABC party calling for a Zulu independence, because they are hanging their call on exactly that they want the Zulu province to live according to African norms and standards, what they call how the natives used to live. So is that call, in your view, conducive to democracy, constitutionalism, and liberty?
Look, what we are saying when it comes to Philip Craig, like we mentioned again, there's a difference between Philip Craig, which is a naturalized foreigner in South Africa, versus someone from South Africa who is born in South Africa, has got two parents being South African. We cannot treat those people the same way when it comes to the issue that we are raising. That a person, for example, like you are saying, that is coming from KZN, that the ABC party, for example, you cannot call for their that their citizenship must be revoked, because if that happens, they become stateless. But in the case that is different, which is Philip Craig, who happens to have dual citizenship with another country, and he's making utterances or suggestions that are divisive, then he needs to be dealt with accordingly. So the case of the ABC party, it is a political statement that they are making, and they are making it based on what they would want South Africa to live by, which currently, in our view, there are parties that, like ATM, for example, that are pushing for, in fact, that we are saying we need to recognize and appreciate the role of having an African value-driven society. And this is what we are doing or preaching at a national broader level, a country level, national level. So that is the fundamental difference between the ABC and Philip Craig.
You're raising the issue in your statement. You're saying this raises significant concerns regarding the potential fragmentation of South Africa, as a Cape independence would undermine the country's unity and diversity, lead to economic instability, and potentially create new social and political tensions. But we've got political parties who are in parliament already, who would have backed a party like Cape Independence or the Cape Exit movement. How do you then rationalize that in your head, that you've got lawmakers who are sitting there every single day who believe in the cessation of the Western Cape?
It's different again, Thabo, because if you remember what I mentioned about, for example, the fundamental difference, again, is the question of citizenship, dual citizenship. That's the first. The second issue, it is the issue that the utterances that is making. If you were to read our letter that we sent to the minister, we made specific reference to him, Philip Craig, wanting to create an Israel-like state in South Africa. The very same Israel that is subject to court proceedings in the ICJ brought by the South African government for the sole basis of committing acts of genocide. Therefore, it is on that reasons whereby his utterances that are very clear, that are leaning more towards genocide, they are leaning towards apartheid, they are leaning towards the subjugation of the indigenous people of South Africa. It is on that reason, again, that the focus is on him. Okay. The other parties can make the political statement, and they don't even mean it, because if you're to openly ask them whether they want the cessation of the Western Cape, they will not give you a straight answer, because for them it's just politicking. But this particular foreigner, which is Philip Craig, is the one that is continuously agitating, raising funds, mobilizing support for this particular genocidal creation of the apartheid-like state in South Africa. And it is for that reason whereby we as the ATM are saying, given that he's got dual citizenship, and therefore it will not be travesty of even international law if his citizenship of South Africa is revoked, because he does have a place that he calls home, which is Britain. So we're saying that let him go to Britain and have in Britain, create the Israel-like state in Britain. Make sure that there's Western values there in Britain. Our Shia is South Africa for South Africans and people who want to abide by the values and the spirit of South Africa.